Oh, hello everyone. Welcome to another Hub Talk from Architect Hub Qatar. The title of our topic today will be the future-proof architect, technology and creativity. Our speaker today is Marcos Rosello. He's the co-founder of ALL Design. Today we are happy to have with us, as usual, architect Abdullah Al-Bakir as a moderator, and we are happy to have for the first time also a newcomer, Shams Alawi. She will be co-moderating with architect Abdullah. Before handing over to our moderators, let me remind you of few tips for our talk. Our talk will be live streaming on Facebook and it will be recorded as well. Please all the attendees to keep in mute during the presentation of Marcos. And once he finishes, we'll open the floor for question and engagement. Just write your question on the chat or just raise your hand and we'll allow him. Architect Abdullah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Salim. It's another lecture for the Architect Hub. Another architect, another famous architect, another topic, a new topic you will like. Future-proof or architectural and technology. Architectural future, our architecture. With a young lady from Batas will introduce our speaker. Go ahead, Shams.
Thank you, Architect Abdullah. I'll be now introducing Architect Marcos Rosello. Marcos Rosello began his architectural career at Johnson, McCaslin and Partners following his graduation from the Westminster University. Over 20 years later, he is still passionate about design and has a keen interest to help move society to a more sustainable future, both in a professional and personal capacity. He successfully established the ALL Design Studio in 2011 with the late Professor Will Alsop designing everything from a teaspoon to a city and to make life a better place. Currently heads up to the UK and the international studios, setting the direction of the practice and leading new business development with key strategies of nothing down, also known as knock KND, through regeneration at being at the forefront of meanwhile spaces with ALL's test bed spaces globally. ALL Design has close links with the universities of Greenwich, East London, and the London School of Architecture. Marcus ran Greenwich University's Unit 1 architecture course for 2 years, mentored students from the University of East London, also known as UEL. He is also a visiting lecturer at Cambridge University, Portsmouth, and YAC in Bologna, Italy. In today's talk, Marcus will share his thoughts about the future-proof architect and will focus on merging technology and creativity to the benefit of design. He will address trending concerns such as, how do you see the future architect? Is there even a role for the architect in the future? Or will the scripting, parametric design, and AI take over? How do we embrace technology while retaining the essence of what an architect is and stay relevant? We must not be slaves to the technology and let the tech drive design for us, but we should use it to our advantage, just like any other tool. We would like to start a discussion on how different types of technology are helping us in terms of design. how we educate ourselves as architects to adapt to new technology to create unique places and buildings that enhance and evolve over time. And we should focus on to have the greatest impact. Thank you so much. I'm really excited and interested to listen to this talk by architect Marcos. I now pass my mic to architect Abdullah. Architect Abdullah, we can't hear you. May you please unmute your mic?
Now you can hear me? Well, the floor is yours, Marcos. Let's hear your lecture and let's apply with you in the future. Go ahead.
Right. Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction. It's great to do this for the Architects Hub Qatar and great to have the student contingent here as well. With the nature of the topic, the future-proof architect, and obviously the name of the Architects Hub, I imagine most people joining us today online are architects and designers and probably have very strong views about this topic. So what I'm going to try and do is keep my time to a minimum so that we can really start the debate and get everyone thinking. I'm actually taking this from a very personal point of view, from my own experiences, and I'll use examples of how our practice, all design, develops our design through different mediums as we try to develop our ideas and then present them, also showing how we try to innovate and push the boundaries. So just very quickly, a very short introduction to All Design. All Design's mission is to make life better. We see ourselves as creatives who adopt a playful, colorful, and often a sculptural approach. And in the process, we find we reveal the surprisingly functional. And if you've actually looked at our website, you'll probably realize that we're not really the people who adhere to the form follows function ethos. Look, we really enjoy what we do. We try not to take things too seriously, and we really enjoy the process, and we try and make sure that everyone who is in the process with us, from the client side to the consultants, that they actually have fun as well. And I think the playfulness that we show is actually reflected in our work. Color is something that's really important to us. A lot of our buildings have a lot of color, but we find color quite an interesting topic, because when we're a child and very young, we really are drawn to color. And in reality, as we get older, we lose this sort of freedom of the use of color. And architects in particular are almost afraid of it. And we find this a real shame. And we think, especially in Europe, cities are very gray and quite dull. Whereas, say, for example, in South America, you see a lot more color there. And you see that the vibrant side of the cities. And we sort of hope that we can sort of improve that as we go along. We also use art as architecture and really do try and take a sculptural approach to our buildings. We find sort of the sculptural side gives our buildings, make them age much better. And also with our buildings, we find that we try not to design just for the people who actually use the buildings, but we want people who walk past the buildings to enjoy the buildings as well. So sort of a little summary here. I want us to see how new technology and the role of the architect might change over time, and actually if there is a future for us. A little spoiler here, I actually believe that there is. The reality, though, the role of the architect has been diminishing over time already. We were once master builders, but we have given away a lot of our responsibilities to other professions. This is partly because building systems and governmental regulations have become more complex, but it is a bit of a shame. And I particularly find this in the international side as well, where clients want one-stop shops and large engineering firms sort of led multidisciplinary scoop up a lot of the work and don't focus enough on the design side, which I think they really, really should. So really, look, we're at a disadvantage. Before I really get into it, I like to sort of show this little diagram. It's something I came across on LinkedIn, and I've taken the name and the person away. particularly because this is being recorded. But this person sort of says, the adaptive plan is here, a new way of thinking about architecture. He hashtags grasshopper and parametric design. So I just want you to think that. Do you see this type of thing as the future of architecture? So let's get into this now. So I've got quite a few words here, which we'll sort of go through here, just a bit of a aid memoir for me. But I'll really start off with sort of talking about sort of software here and sort of future-proofing. But first of all, just a bit of background to me. By the way, I'm not as old as it looks like as these pictures are, but just to give you an idea. So I was probably one of the last generations that started my architectural studies, which was in the early 90s, where at the beginning of each term, we'd literally rush into the studios to try and get the best drawing boards. But already by the second year, computers started to come in, and we could, not very good ones, I might add, but we started to be able to use 2D and 3D software fairly early on, such as MiniCAD it was called, and MicroStation. I've always actually loved gadgets and computers, so really got into that side of things. But in parallel, we sort of did the drawings, and making models is something I always enjoyed. But what it meant early on, I realized the importance of having the right tools for the job. And many of these tools would help me focus more on what I enjoy, which is the creative side. Our main jobs as architects is to design and deliver good projects, and we should try and do this as easily and as fun as possible. We are more productive that way. At the moment, I think these are actually very exciting times. There have been big leaps in tools that have helped us spend more time designing rather than drafting. The move from handheld drafting to 2D digital in the 90s was quite a big step. And then from there sort of came 3D design, where we could actually, and this is quite a big leap for maybe some of the students who didn't realize this, that we're digital, but we'd still have to draw a door in plan, and draw a door in section, and then to draw a door in elevation. And this is just a waste of time. But then we started to be able to do everything in 3D and draw things once, which is great. And then BIM really came along in the early 2000s. And then in the 2010s, we had sort of parametric design come in, augmented reality, and VR. But what I'm sort of seeing in the next decade, really coming to force here, is augmented reality, even more, where we can communicate our ideas much better, but also the digital twins of cities, and AI really becoming a really interesting part of this, where we'll have the digital twin city. For example, Singapore is just one of them now, where the Internet of Things are really communicating, and we can test buildings out before they're even built, which is actually an amazing tool to see how people react to it as well. But I don't want to go into too much detail. I've got to rely a lot on my staff members to help me with this, because I am getting a bit older, and the younger guys are always going to be better than us in that sense. I've got we used quite a word here, which is software slaves. And this is a real danger of us becoming software slaves. But now this is a possible threat of the tools being the drivers of design and not us, or us being complacent. One of the biggest threats are us using tools in the wrong way, or the tools limiting us to what we can design. In this case, I'll give you two examples in which I see as a threat to the profession, and we'll see a large proportion of the architects being obsolete because of this in the future. The first example of limited tools, I'll use SketchUp as an example, really mainly because it's one of the first tools in the early 2000s. There's this big commotion about it, because finally there's this tool that we could really quick to sketch things out in 3D, meaning we could do quick massing studies, get floor areas, and seeing what the shadows are like. And it was really good, but it's really a limiting tool, because suddenly we sort of saw so many projects were just flat boxes and simple geometries, because that's all the software could do. It couldn't do curves very well, and well, especially three-dimensional curves. So people stopped doing that, and that was a real danger. And jokingly in the studio, I actually say, as a design tool, SketchUp is banned, because we can't really do what we need to do. Then the second use of parametric design is in the wrong way. Practices like Zaha and Gary use the tool exactly the way it should be done, which is to realize ideas they have developed. And in a sense, it is an amazing tool because it really has progressed the built form of complex buildings greatly. So we can actually get the designs built now. But to be using the wrong way around I think is really bad because we play with the tool to generate the forms. It does not take an architect to do this. And the process will be obsolete for us when the AI really kicks in. Now, I've had engineers present proudly to me software they've been developing with coders that can take an empty site and they can put all the data that they need to, and they can start doing massing studies, give a mix of height, number, density, and this will only get to what I call bigger, but almost worse and worse, where multidisciplinaries will be doing this on really large master plans, sucking the soul out of any creativity, and possibly creating almost the ghettos of the future with no thought to placemaking and people, which is really one of our key roles moving forward. So now I'll sort of talk about how our practice sort of uses our software and raw medium and tools we use to create the different softwares. And this is how I sort of see us as a practice, how we're going to try and future-proof the practice. We always try and start with a blank canvas when we do our projects. It's sort of the idea we lose our preconceptions of the past so we can start afresh. Then depending on the project, we can start by sketching, modeling both physical models and digitally as well. And this enables us to really choose what type of tool we want. Sometimes there might be, a computer tool which might work for one project but not the other, but we try to have as many different tools just to make sure that the software itself isn't actually limiting us to what we want to do. All our projects, as I sort of said, really start off in 3D from an early stage. And so my computer's stopped there. Okay. And nowadays, what's really good is I sort of mentioned that we have different softwares for different things. And it can be quite annoying when one software doesn't integrate with others, but already software is actually creating plugins. So for example, with Rhino and Grasshopper, we can now incorporate that directly into our BIM model in Revit. So again, the software here is really making our lives that much easier. We are also using simple things like VR in the design process and in our presentations as well. Which is a good tool. I think it's still in its infancy, but I can see that moving quite a lot in the future in a positive way. But again, the way we approach our design is VR. It doesn't have to be only in the later stages. Why can't we actually use VR at the early stage where we actually got sketches? Because part of the problem nowadays, clients expect so much from us that they see these things and think it's finished. But in reality, there's so much still open to design, and sometimes we show them too much too early on, whereas we could actually create these sketches in VR or 3D, like give a client a taste of what we're trying to do, but without giving too much away. I'd also like to add that this isn't just architectural software that limits our creativity. Although having offices all around the world, we've been using virtual conferences and screen sharing for quite a long time, but it still doesn't beat being in the same room. And when COVID first came, it became the norm for the majority of us to do this type of thing here. And there's that initial sense of, oh, this is great. We don't need to have these meetings in person anymore. But I can almost guarantee everyone on this call realized after a few months of doing this, we started to realize how less efficient it was, how much less we were actually talking. And that social and human contact went missing. And even now, for example, forget what I'm presenting here on the screen, where this is something we presented to a client on one of our projects. This is how we sort of presented so they could actually see us and see me talking, and using my hands, which I do quite a bit. But right now you can't see me, and so what you're actually missing out right here is you're actually only seeing 45% of my communication, because of that 7% is the verbal side and 38% is the tone. So we're losing 55% of the, which is the body language. And that visual connection is so important as designers, whether it's talking to each other or talking to clients. So I'm very keen on getting everyone back into the office as soon as we can, depending which country and regulations we're actually allowed to do now. But as I say, look, we really see design as a collaborative approach, and this is really important for the future. But this isn't just internally as designers, but it's with all others in all areas of design. You know, our best projects are the ones we collaborate from the beginning, especially when doing projects in new countries, where we make sure we collaborate to get that in-depth local knowledge that we simply can't replicate by looking through search engines on the internet, which a lot of people still do. So the next one here is best practice, lazy practice. And I just want to touch on sort of the idea, what we call failure is good. Because, you know, what the failure is good, what does it actually mean? If you fail, which obviously you don't do all the time, but if you do fail on something, it means you're trying. It means that you are pushing the boundaries. And that's, I think that's a really good thing, because that means you're pushing yourself. And I've learned a lot through a lot of my failures. And as long as you don't make the same mistakes each time, I think it's actually a very good thing to do. We call best practice lazy practice, as we believe that something might have been best practice at a certain point in time, but cities need to evolve. Technology evolves, as do people, and COVID is a really good example of this. If we keep doing the same thing, AI in the future will take over our role, because best practice is something from the past, and that's exactly how AI basically gets clever and clever. It uses the past. So what we need to do for the future, we need to keep innovating, keep questioning, keep moving forwards, and really not get lost in the past. And I'll just sort of explain what I mean about this, about sort of moving on from best practice in a couple of projects that I have here. So the first one is Bradford, which was a visioning exercise to regenerate the city and enhance the town centre. So a vision exercise is done something before a master plan to get the big idea, to get the creative juices going, and to get buy-in with clients. You know, it's opposed to a master plan, which almost sets out the parameters afterwards for development. So here we have the idea of replacing roads with green corridors and parks, and creating a greener, more sustainable city with this idea of this huge lake right in the center of the town square. And although if you think at the beginning this idea is simply not feasible, that's absolutely correct. But what it does is sort of it increases the bar of design and thinking what could actually be, and then we can think about what actually happens in reality. And it does sound fantastical having a lake, but what actually happened in the end, we had Bradford City's Park Mirror Pool, which is in the town square, which is now a major international tourist destination, and has become the gathering place for the Bradford's community, a place to paddle the pool on a hot day, and a place for major cultural performances when we actually take the water away as well. And again, like a lot of our projects, we like the day and night theme, because there's always different uses for places, and multiple uses is really important to have that flexibility. And you know, this really shows how you can get the old and the new merging very, very successfully. The second one is again showing again how best practice, we moved on from best practice, and again how things close to our heart of art and sculptural language, something we do regularly, and technology work well together. I really like this quote from Will, and you know, it says, "I have to assume that on one of those really cold, miserable January mornings, there'll be people down there traveling to a job they'd probably rather not do. What I want them to feel is a little bit of cheer and a little bit of joy." The words cheer and joy. Again, this is something that we can really put forward as architects and as designers, because we can sort of relate to that. And again, AI is something that can't do that. So, you know, it's what a lovely way to start a project before you actually, you know, putting the pen to the paper here. So we started sort of sketching here, and had this a simple idea of, you know, best practice in this case would be a simple box underground that people would get, you know, almost be herded like sheep, following wayfinding signs to get out, and there'd be no real excitement about going into a place. So the idea for this project was a station of light, where light would be the driver of the design, where light would be help with the wayfinding, so you naturally know where to move, because light is something you naturally be drawn to. And here on this idea, we had 3 points of light: one, natural light coming down into the platforms, and then on the entry and exit points, we also had natural light coming through as well. And part of this process, we use models all the way through the design process to really start to explore this, and having different sculptural elements on the outside, but also on the inside with the columns as well. And always remembering the idea of getting this light coming down and always working it through the sections as well. So in the end, we did have this project built in Toronto for the metro station, and having two very distinct elements, again, helping with the wayfinding, not keeping that at the same side. But we really tried to incorporate art as much as we could within this, and having skylights that brought the light coming down. But these were beautiful sculptural forms as well, and bringing in color into this project, not just during the day, but giving nighttime a really different feel as well. And, you know, creating that sense of departure or arrival into the space as well, but seeing that light at the top there. We also like doing collaborations with artists, and on this project we got Lightspell, a German company, that came up with this very clever digital clock installation that incorporated sort of old school digital watch faces that went all the way along the platform and out the building. And literally people on the platform could type in messages on an app, and actually these messages would be shown on the platforms, which is an absolutely lovely idea. Although this is a very sculptural building, it was a very technical building, and the client wanted us to deliver this whole building in BIM, you know, from the design stage all the way to the construction and beyond. So so this process had to be extremely accurate. But again, because we came from the artistic side, you know, Will had a lot of visions on this, and he didn't want everything to be perfect that you'd get in our drawing. So when it came to these little fins we've got on the brown part, I don't think you can see my my mouse, but we've got these little fins here, which is sort of these sculptural elements on here, and we had to tell the guys welding on here who were doing this fantastic weld, we don't want that. We want this to be a rough feeling because we want that sort of human feel to it. You know, it's architecture, but it's sort of sculptural side as well. They obviously looked at you know, Will very blankly when he actually said this to them, but they sort of got the understanding when we actually finished this. But it's not just about the architecture; it's about sort of the products that are coming through this as well. You know, as I say, we see things from a teaspoon to a city. Product design is extremely important, and we've got to make sure that it all fits into one. It's not just, you know, the wayfinding, the lighting, or even the seating. You know, it's important how even, you know, the electrical rooms, how they fit within the building, and even the substations. You know, we shouldn't hide them away. You know, these are elements that should be celebrated. So we have this all-encompassing building that, in the end, we think is a very successful building, and hopefully will stand the test of time. Finally, the third project here is actually very relevant for the future, because it comes to our idea of knock nothing down, but in sustainability terms, we won't be just building new cities and new buildings all the time. We really do have to integrate the old and the new, because that is really the most sustainable way of developing things. And what we've got to realize is it's not always about just keeping the buildings of architectural interest. We need to keep communities together. You know, people have memories of places, you know, and families have memories which generations sort of bring down, and we need to keep that community together. And successful projects are the ones that keep a bit of old and add to the new. So you always have that familiarity, and people enjoy that so much more. So this is where we come to our testbed spaces, which was which started with us and our client meeting us and saying, you know, he wants to have a bit of fun. He had this big empty space which had a huge amount of history. It used to be where huge ice blocks came up from the Thames, which was used for the restaurants to keep things cold. It then became a place for circus animals, and then as a milk farm. But then we started to create this community. We had the Royal College of Art, Vivian Westwood, the designer, and we were there. We had events, exhibition, film service, location services. We hosted talks. You know, we had about 1,000 visitors coming in a week. Street Kitchen provided these gourmet food boxes, which are absolutely delicious. The London Distillery Company had the first whiskey that was made in London for over 100 years. Edge of Arabia Gallery brings contemporary art from the Middle East to London. and the world champion boxer Barry McGuigan built a boxing ring and practice gym next to a test bed 1 yard. This eclectic mix of people brought this community engagement together and collaboration together. And we had this beach area, which we called, which basically had a riverside bar and dining area to which the locals flocked to share a drink, food, and ideas. Inside the courtyard offered free ping pong and football tables, mini golf, and seating for everyone. And then we sort of moved on to testbed 2 in China, where we had talks there. And I remember sort of saying to people there that cities are always in such a rush to move forward that they forget about their past, and we should really try to keep buildings as much as we can and sort of integrate them into the way we do things. So we started sketching ideas from this old money factory, which was deserted, and we kept the old, which everyone knew, but we started to pull bits out, add things on top, created these links in between the building, and then started to think really how we could get this to work. So we started collaborating with a lot of our local artists, architects, and sometimes some of the spaces were successful, sometimes they weren't, but that didn't matter, because altogether it created this absolutely amazing space that didn't have boundaries. And this is what was the really interesting part of it, is everyone thinks you have a use for one thing and a use for another thing, but we don't believe that. Why should a street, for example, just be something that gets you from A to B? A street should be somewhere that you can, you can sit, you can talk to people, you can learn about something, you can have, as you got here, some people dancing, we can have art installation, light shows, but create this community. And now it's become this absolutely amazing tourist destination because it's got that familiarity and the oldness, but mixed with the new, and it has this beautiful feel to it. So I'm just going to get a sip of water now. Right. So those are sort of our projects, but as I sort of say, there's a lot of negative, but I think, this is a time for us to be optimistic if we're being creative, because I'm going to make this point a few more times, this last part. AI can only learn from the past. It can only create it cannot create new ideas and for example, new visions. It cannot create joy or take into consideration memories and what is important to people. Our creativity is what is going to make us relevant in the future. The future-proof architect is a creative architect who is flexible, adaptable, understands all the tools to his disposal, is not afraid to make mistakes, and pushes the boundaries and innovates. Someone who is part of the debate and part of the community. AI could be a major threat, but only to certain types of commercial architects, as softwares will take over these type of jobs. But architects that don't rely on the past have a much stronger future. Student education should really be focused on exploring and creating, and on the creative side, not just the technical that can be learned while working. Or actually, in reality, I think the future is going to be on the technical side. You literally ask someone like Google how things need to be done, and they'll give you sort of a reference straight away. So again, even the technical side will be we'll be able to focus on the design side. So I'm really excited about the future, and I believe there is a really definitely is a future-proof architect. And I'm just sort of finishing off here now. This thing is just one of those things where I think this is almost what's wrong with profession, with our profession. Too many people use tools and become lazy here. As I've said, we're really giving away a lot, and the scary fact that the vast majority of our built environment, architects simply aren't involved. For example, this is very UK centric, but only 6% of new homes in the UK are designed by architects. 6%. That means over 200,000 homes were built in England in a year without the input of an architect. But on a more serious note, how we do it as a profession, we've got to make sure we're still around when AI comes in. The mundane practices will fall away, and people who put up this type of thing, although excited, would they have a job in the future? I really am not sure. But it's the creative studios that have a chance to flourish. AI, as I've said, AI uses the past and can't do the subjective or the creative. Therefore, we should embrace technology. All the projects we showed you, although we have a creative use of the technology, I think in a fairly big way. This gives us more time to work on where there's real value and enjoyment, which is the creativity, the exploring, the debating, the creating, the making, using culture, art, staying close to the universities, and seeing what's coming up, teaching. All of these things are we should use to our strengths. And this is something we should be celebrating right now, as this really is our strongest asset. So that's broadly what I want to talk about. I think I've probably spoken for a bit too long, but now this is where I think we should open up the debate, and I'm very interested to hear what people's own views are for this. So let's start. Thank you.
Thank you for a great lecture. We'll open now, whoever have a question or comment. Well, let's start. What do you advise? That we have a lot of architect students from Qatar University. What do you advise them? How do you direct them? Should they depend a lot on technology, or should they use their hand more, the old-fashioned? After they get more experience, then they use the technology.
I think my biggest regret actually is I didn't hand sketch enough, and I think literally the best tool is hand sketching, because what's in your head is so much more easily depicted with your hand. So in the beginning, I think the strongest thing they can do is really learn how they can communicate through sketches in the beginning, because it's the quickest way to get your ideas through. But then start looking at the technologies, because there's no doubt in the future we have to use technology. It's how we're going to stay relevant, but we've got to be smart about it. But for me now, I think when we get students in, especially when they're younger, what we're more interested in is their way of thinking, their openness about design, and then we start teaching them sort of the skills that they need when they're actually with us after their first 3 years. And then by the time when they've done their diploma or masters, that's sort of the stage that we sort of see, they've got a good understanding of design, and they've sort of created a tool set that they actually start to use, that they can use, and that actually adds value to us, because we as a practice, we have very strong links with universities, but it's the younger generation who brings something new to us, and we can, young students can learn a lot from us ourselves, but we can actually learn a lot from them. So being as creative as you can, and not getting too technical at a young age is quite important. You need to keep that freedom. Don't focus on something too early. Just try to understand as much as you can, and read a lot.
Would this technology give like the upper hand to other engineers, such as civil engineer, mechanical, electrical, to become architects without studying architecture, using this technology, putting their whatever in their brain, and become with design they think it's a creative? Would that happen?
I really think that's happening now. Especially with the big multidisciplinary practices, because they've got the resources to really invest in these in this type of software and actually create their own type of software. But even for them, they need to be careful, because I think in the near future, I could be designing, or my team will be designing using some software, and straight away the AI will be working behind them, sort of giving them an idea. Okay, so we know what the region is, we know what the, for example, the rock base is. It will already automatically be doing the calculations for the foundations, telling you how many columns you might need, what type of facade is going to be. So actually, I'm almost think that there's more risk for engineers, because that is mathematically based, which AI is. They might actually be more irrelevant unless they're being the ones that are being creative as well. We're very lucky. We work with some of the best engineers in the world, because we are just a design studio. So if we have a certain project, we don't have to rely on our in-house team. We can go to this engineer is going to be great for this project, or another engineer is going to be great for that. But I think they've got a bigger risk than us of being irrelevant in the future, because it's mathematical based. They are data driven, and that's what AI is going to be.
Shams, can you read the question by Shahad al-Badr?
Yes, of course. Saida says, yes, and recourses are everywhere nowadays. I don't think it's a question. She was agreeing with Marcus.
Okay. Another question.
Umayma asks, what about advice for old school architects who are not up to date and on the use of latest softwares?
Okay, so that's a question for me then. How I think I'm going to be relevant. I think again, it's we have CPDs, continual professional development, and try and sort of where you can look up what's going on now. Again, see if you can go to universities, be part of when there's crits or things going on, see what people are doing, and literally see if there's a sort of keen interest. There's no harm in you yourself picking up your sketchbook, thinking about what might interest you, think about design yourself. If you don't have a creative role at the moment, maybe see what other people are doing in your office that is creative, and try and have sort of design reviews in your office as much as you can. For us, design reviews is quite an important part, because one designer isn't as good as two designers, which isn't as good as three designers discussing what design's about. We progress so much further as a collaborative rather than individuals. So it's about talking and just seeing what other people are doing.
Okay, we have Noor Sayyid. Go ahead, please. Ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much,
Dr.
Ahmad. And thank you to Architects Hub for providing this opportunity for a discussion. It's a very timely discussion. And Marcos, thank you so much for picking up some of the issues that are very fundamental to the future of architecture and planning as well. I myself am an architect by training, but right now I don the mantle of an urban planner. So it's kind of a slight shift in my role over professions spanning about 20 years. So I've moved from one domain to another domain. The point that you picked up on things like artificial intelligence and Internet of Things. I mean, these are things that you can see are having a major influence on making so-called smart cities. I think your presentation and your views very much resonate in terms of making the society smart. I mean, it's how people react to their environment and how they interact with the environment. I think that's what is the spirit of the whole thing. I completely agree with what you're telling in terms of having an open mind for design and thinking. I mean, all these tools in future, I'm sure there will be even more smarter tools. But I think the initiative lies with professionals like us to really harness them in the right way. And at the end of the day, it's always the creativity that will trump everything else. I think this is the point I wanted to make. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I also want to add, like, from my experience, like my first semester, and I was learning how to come up with like creative projects or ideas. A mistake I did was start on on the program, on the software, like start doodling the ideas on programs. And I would remember like my professors would tell me not to start on the program because you would be really limited. I didn't get it until like after the first project or the second, when I actually started doodling and trying out every design. And then when I finally finalized the product or like the concept, I can move on to the software. Maybe it can change a bit, but it's way better than like sticking to the softwares because it's so limiting. I've noticed a huge difference, and I feel like I'm like missing out a lot on, like, compared to old architects, like the old system, the technical. I feel like I'm missing out, but I'll try my best to like connect both the old and the new and mix it up. Thank you.
Umaym, I think, had a question. She raised her hand and disappeared.
Yeah, I can come back. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shams, thank you. I mean, that word old got me going, but okay. So the question was, if we're to look at the future client, the persona of the clients are very tech savvy. They like to use their phones, their mobiles. Probably they'd look for an AI architect that would give them the design they want, the experience they want quickly. Is time an issue? Do architects take time to produce a design, then produce a building? Is architecture really going to be buildings or human experiences? Because the latest technologies, from what I've been watching, you can transform a room using lots of, I don't know, digital solutions into something today and something different tomorrow. So really the relevance of the architect, the mindset perhaps needs to shift. It's not just about the software. The software is what the client sees. The product is what they experience, and they really don't know who's behind it. Is it the architect as we know it, as they know him or her as a professional, or is it the digital genius behind creating the experiences? So if it's a bit complicated. And for us, for me, I've started, the picture you showed, I had a T-square and a board. That board you had was quite sophisticated. And to jump to now, it's really very interesting. So I'm a bit confused. Perhaps you could help clarify the confusion. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Okay, well that's a difficult one. Look, I think you get different types of clients, and there's some clients that their bottom line is making as much profit as they can, and they're not so interested in the design side. So you really get these clients, they just want to, they have a plot, they want to develop it, say, into a residential building. You know, a lot of them might not even use architects, they might just use technicians. And you know, AI is going to come into its own for those type of clients. And unfortunately, there probably isn't anything we can do there. I think our role is more going to be, as obviously I've said, on the creative side, but how buildings might actually hit the ground, so the urban side of it, how your experiences are into the public places. There's always going to be one-offs that people want to do. But in a way, sort of educating, if we can educate clients more and sort of sell them, you know, what is the value of the architect, or what we're actually bringing to the table. You know, what we bring is sort of experiences that people enjoy, and there's a real value in what we do. You know, there's examples of what we've done where some of the buildings that we've done, for example, our Toronto building, OCAD, I think that increased tourism by 2.3% when it was one of the first modernist buildings, and that sort of shows you that architecture is good for urban renewal and good for tourism, because if you do things right and draw people in, mainly to sort of public buildings or public spaces, then there's a real value to it. So you know, so the private side, which are the clients, which are going to be very hard to have in the future, but there's a lot of sort of governmental or commercial clients that need people to come to their buildings, sort of office spaces, retail, hotels, that type of thing, where people, you know, especially after COVID again, we're becoming more about going somewhere for an experience, something different. But that experience needs to be something you want again and again. You don't want the idea of sort of Las Vegas, where you want to go there once, you've experienced it, and like, okay, I've experienced it, but I won't go back again. You want to create the experience that you feel comfortable with, and you can go backwards and forwards. And there'll always be that space for architecture. And again, that's the differentiation is. We'll always be able to do that. We'll always be able to create a side to where public can actually access. I think I've sort of answered your question. Perhaps I can babble on for quite a bit longer, so maybe we'll get to the next one.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any other question?
There's actually a question from Mohammed Abed we skipped. It says, how can technology help the creative side of architecture? For example, we see the Sagrada family being brought back to life via 3D printing and art we had lost in the last century or so.
That's a good question. Just repeat that again, please. There's quite a lot in that question.
Sure. How can technology help the creative side of architecture? And he's using an example. He's saying that we see in the Sagrada family being brought to life via 3D printing and art we had lost in the last century or so.
Yeah, so Sagrada Familia is a really good example, because I remember actually visiting that in Barcelona when I was a student. Second year student. We had a fantastic trip to Barcelona, and that was one of the most impressive well, I actually think it's still one of the most impressive buildings, because exactly it used there's no drawings for that project, and basically it's been 30 years that they've been building this project, and based on photographs that they've had, and literally doing a computer generated model of that to actually fabricate that. And that's amazing. And the same thing will happen with Notre Dame Cathedral. So again, this might not be right, but I do believe there weren't any drawings for Notre Dame when they had the big fire in Paris. What was it, 3 or 4 years ago now? Again, here we had, I actually think it was a computer program, a game, actually basically had mapped out the whole of it. And that's what was actually used to as a base for, which will be used as a base to rebuild it. In terms of other sort of technology in the future, I think I quite like the idea of gamification of projects. So it's sort of part of the Twin Cities, where we have the idea of, you say you got Singapore and you've got the digital version, they can test things out. So, what if you had a new city that you actually gamify, so people can go into an area, actually see what it's like, and you actually see their physical reactions to how the buildings might be, and you can sort of gauge whether they like it, they don't like it, whether spaces are used or they're dangerous. There's so many things you can actually do. You could almost have a virtual city where you might be part of a community. You get to know your neighbors before it's even built. And so when you actually move into these new cities, you know what it is, you know where the grocery store is, where the gym is, where the park is, and you know the people who are around you. So when you actually move in, you've really got that community. I mean, that's fantastic, because at the moment, when you start new projects, to actually build that community is such a hard thing to do. But if you could actually preempt that by actually getting people, it could even just be a simple app. You start asking people where to go and everything. That could be a phenomenal thing for the future. And it's quite an exciting thing, actually. So that was a good question.
Well, we have now Said again with us, but before you ask your question, how would you advise a planner? Because for myself, I think planning and architecture is the same, but one is zooming in a building and one is zooming in a whole city, or one is looking at a whole city in a bigger scale, and one is looking and zooming in a building. Since Noah was talking about, he was changing his field from architecture to urban planning. We are like the Sagrada, it's like a monument chosen in the city. Can you elaborate on that? I mean, should we select always a monument to show our city, or Should we select the comfort of the people, narrow roads? Like in Doha, it's sunny here, or in Qatar, today is like 46 degrees. So should we go with the creativity of architecture, or should we go with the safety for people, less narrow roads or arcades for people to walk? Can you elaborate on that? Then we'll have an hour.
Yeah. I'm still actually enjoying the temperature here. Hasn't gone too much for me yet. So in terms of urban design, I really struggle with urban design because, again, this goes back to sort of the best practice and who's actually doing the urban design. That might have been designed, 10, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago, but is it still relevant to what's happening now? I sort of believe we shouldn't be looking at just demolishing large swathes of Doha. We should be looking at really keeping as much of the heritage as we can, but adapting it to sort of the future use. So you get that familiarity, so you have generations of Qataris who can still remember certain things in certain places and keep that sort of heritage and those memories going. But I don't think sort of having these monuments and that sort of affects it. They can enhance it. I think the Mishri project is a perfect example of how it's taken sort of key elements of sort of urban planning, shading, massing, narrow streets, and it's made it relevant to now. It's an amazing quarter, and it sort of relates very well to here. But again, look, I don't want to sound arrogant because I don't know enough about this at all. But to me, as an outsider, I sort of love the feel to it. But then again, I love the feel of Souk Waqif. I appreciate it's been redone. But that whole quarter, that when I really started staying here, that's the area I got to know, and that's the area I've walked around a lot, and that's the area I really like, because to me that feels like what Doha is. There's other parts of Doha which are fantastic, but right now, is that really Doha? I don't know. But for me, Souk Waqif, Mishri, these type of places feel to me more like has the essence of what Doha is. But moving forward, I think, again, this is sustainability. We should try and keep as much of the older as possible and just enhance it, add things to it. If we don't, at the moment, the roads in Qatar are all being built up, and they're huge roads. But if we can sort of change the roads around a bit more, just to make them more sort of pedestrian friendly, get as much shading where we can, and the simple tools which we have, which can be in different areas, they can be sort of different. There's a different representation. But what going back to the original point for me is we've got to be very careful with urban design that doesn't dictate what buildings are, and we can have interesting buildings and tall buildings that can sort of represent the sort of the future of Qatar, but there needs to be that local context or something that is relevant, because I want to go to a city where if I land there and I've got a blindfold and they say, "Where are you?" I want to be able to look around and say, "Yes, I'm in Doha." And at the moment, Doha has that. So many cities I've traveled to before, I know that if I was blindfolded and looked around, I could say I'm in I'm in the west coast of America, and I'm completely different on a different continent. So I think that's what I like about Qatar, is it does have that that heritage side, which is just so important for a city in the future to be successful.
Thank you. Now, what Saeed, go ahead, ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Abdullah. It's not really a question; it's a reaction to what Marcos was telling earlier. I think he kind of nailed it in the head, actually, when he said that the technology is actually aiding to improve the thought processes within the community as such. So in a sense, all the technology, the technological features, the advancement, Internet of Things, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's so many things that are actually tending to make the community smarter, not just the city smarter. I mean, to make the city smarter, you have enough things, mobile phones, mobile communication, Internet of Things, whatnot. But is it really helping the people, the users, to communicate with their environment? I think what Marcos was telling in the just before I spoke very much relates to this. It's not just about an identity of a place. It's also about how the interaction with the humans is sustained over a longer period of time. It's not just sustainability in terms of art and architecture and environment and the public realm itself, but it's also the way that the environment that we create continues the dialogue over a longer period. I think that's the vision that Marcos has been talking about. I'm probably being a little more philosophical and talking from a planning perspective, but I think architecture and planning go hand in hand in creating that kind of dialogue with the users as such. That's all. I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you from the urban planning?
I am, yes. I am with the ministry, yes.
Which floor, the 10th or the 9th? Or?
On the 17th.
Master planning.
Qatar National Master Plan, yes.
Master plan. Okay, good. Anybody have a question about the master plan?
Not on this forum. Thank you.
This is why I need to be careful what I say. Yeah.
Well, any other question? Umayma's back. Yalla, Umayma, go ahead. Ask your question. Don't write.
Okay. Yes, I'm back. So since we're talking urban planning, and Marcus had mentioned something about gamifying the experience, this is very interesting. I'd be the last person to know about it. So in my mind, what comes to mind is this picture of, instead of architects presenting their work or projects, like in CGIs or presentations, clients would get to wear goggles or VR goggles or something and walk down the street in urban planning projects and actually experience what it's going to look like and feel like. I don't know if they're going to experience temperature. That could be something in the works. The question would be also, how feasible is that? Is it being done already? The next question would be, the future architect, what kind of team would he have on board in the office? Long time ago, it would be the architect, perhaps, then it was draftsman, and then something else. What would be the ideal team for the architect to be part of the future architecture generation? And can architects work on their own? Like if I wanted to be a solo architect, I couldn't produce the project as is required now without having a team on board with me. That's a bit of a dilemma. Perhaps you could tell us a bit more about that. Thanks, Marcos.
You really are asking tough questions. Okay, so it's an interesting point about the temperature thing, actually, because whenever we've done the VR experience, when we just have the visual side of things, it isn't as immersive as you feel, but as soon as you add sound to it, actually like the video where I was sitting down with my colleague, Jacob, and we're sort of sharing the screen. So we did that with VR. And as soon as we actually put the sound of water and birds in there, suddenly your brain just clicks, and then it suddenly becomes more immersive. And that again relates to the point I was making earlier about the communication side of things, about how important the visual communication is. So, we really do use all our senses. So the more senses we can actually use with the sort of the AI experience or the VR experience, augmented reality experience, I think the better. Look, in terms of what team in the future, that isn't something I've even thought about yet. That's why I think it's a very good question, but quite a hard one. The reality, I mean, from the top of my head, it could be actually very small teams in the end, because, the reality is your team is actually a AI assistant that you actually talk to and start asking them to do things, and sort of say, you know, find out, I want to know about this, find out about this. What happens if we put this here, what put that there? For all we know, might not actually be doing any movement at all with our hands, or you know, the scary one might actually be, you know, directly from the brain. But that's going, you know, way too far into, well, with Elon Musk, not too far into the future, according to him. But I think the teams could be quite a bit smaller. So you might actually get your specialisms people, and then almost the assistants. You might actually be the computers, and then you just have a team of other designers who just you collaborate with, get your ideas. But I still think collaboration in the future, it won't be single people. It'll be teams of people, like-minded people who sort of collaborate, and you know, they just, you know, it could be you just get together, come up with an idea, and just develop it together with AI behind you.
Thank you for that. Just one little thing. Elon Musk is they're actually building on Mars, or going to build on Mars now. I wonder if schools are teaching students that what Mars is going to be like, building in Mars, and what you need to wear to get to Mars, and how it's interesting. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Marcos, for that. Thank you.
Sayed back. Okay, Sayed, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I
No
can't stop
problem.
myself. I just
good.
wanted to I just wanted to add to what Marcos was telling, because Umaima's I think earlier question was about gamifying the whole experience. I would like to take an example of some of the work done by MIT. They actually have a lab which is specializing in smart city solutions, and in terms of gamifying things, I mean, they take it to very literal levels. They had a very strange problem of you know, the issue of migrants going into Europe, and parts of Germany were facing a severe crisis where, although the local population was welcoming to the migrant community, but they couldn't find a process of finding sites for settling down these migrant communities. And MIT had developed a model which basically, you know, kind of puts in all the planning density parameters into simple blocks, and then the community is invited in, and you're actually playing on a board that is electrically wired, and it has a representation of building blocks, and you can actually switch building blocks, and you will immediately know what is the effect on the other parameter in terms of economy, in terms of you know, they had about 10 or 15 parameters, and people actually they found solutions that would probably have taken years within a few weeks. I mean, that's the power of gamifying this process of planning and design. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd add to that as well, actually, because the benefit of gamifying things is we can test things out before they're built, so we can see if things don't actually work ahead of time, which will literally, you know, stop us having problems in the future. So actually, that's you know, an important point as well. Honestly, it's you know, as I say, I'm quite a geeky person, as my colleagues know, and I think it's going to be fascinating in the future. Scary, but you know, but fascinating.
I have a comment for Sayed. Sayed, if your master plan, since you are on the 17th floor, if you have all this data on all levels, and whether the international level or the local level or the detail, if you have it all, then you will not face any problem, because you are planning for 25 years. You are not planning for a year or two. Architect might take like 6 months to design a building, but you are creating a master plan for a city for like 25 years. If you are facing a problem because something like the COVID, it's not expected, okay, but otherwise, you should have the solution ready before, because you are creating your master plan for 25 years. But if you are using non-specialist people, then you expect all the problem. This is, I think, my comment. I'm gonna ask, there is like Amir Shapir, if he have a question, I'll just go by the name and ask people to join us. I don't want them to be silent.
There's
Amir
actually one
Shapir.
question.
Question, go ahead, Shams.
It's from Saida. We still didn't
Still the
announce
same
it.
guy?
No. Saida Al-Badr.
No.
She's
Said Al-Badr, okay, go ahead, Said.
What about the use of social media tools to engage with architecture, since there is a strong shift towards social media by young people? That's your question.
Unfortunately, I'm not young anymore. But I try very hard, and the guys in the office try very hard to do the social media side of things. And so the younger generation sort of expect things to be done very quickly nowadays and to see things instantly. What's great about social media is you can see what's going on and what's relevant. And before, when I was, again, I hate saying this, when I was younger, I'd be getting the architectural magazines once a week, and that's how we sort of updated ourselves. But with social media now, if you sort of join the right groups, you really do get the advantage of seeing what's relevant. And a lot of the news agencies now, like for me, and again, I always see the staff in the office. In the mornings they go onto the Zine website and see what's going on there. So it is quite relevant. I'd be interested actually if some of the younger people here might have a response to that one. I'm leading this one to someone who might want to respond. Is anyone there?
Shams can respond.
I think I'm new to the social media, not new, but like I'm still a first year student, and because of COVID, it's very hard to experience everything, just like my generation would experience. So I'm still new to everything, but I still keep up with social media. I follow all the accounts and in all the social media to keep up and understand and learn, because with the current pandemic, what happened, it was it was helpful. It helped me understand what's happening and what's going on. So yeah, social media is important, especially during a pandemic. And I think everyone should also connect with each other, all generations too, to collab and share their ideas and projects and work together and create beautiful cities and so many amazing projects. That's what I think. So I advise everyone to join on social media and learn and interact. And yeah.
That's why we've joined the Architects of Qatar for exactly that type of reason, because I think it's important. There's a community here with like-minded people that actually have the same interests, but might not know the people or wouldn't bump into them in their daily lives. So this is a good forum. Again, this is my first one, but that actually enables us to actually link up with like-minded people and learn from each other, which is exactly what we should be doing.
Yes, learn from each other. Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Architect Marcos Rosello. Thank you, Architect Abdullah. Thank you all for coming and listening to the talk and debating. It was a great experience. I learned a lot, and I hope to see you guys again. And if you have any questions, you can send an email and we will reply to them.
No, before you close, I have a question to Marcus.
Okay, sure, of course.
How about exchanging, since we have a lot of students, those students can visit your office or can get a training in your office, whether through the Hub or Qatar University?
Yeah, I think, look, as a practice, we always promote inter-student meetings. But obviously at the moment we've got COVID going on, we'd be very happy to come to the university, do crits and things like that. And when I think it's a bit early days for us here to get students coming in, but you know, as soon as we're ready to get people in, we're absolutely for it. We do it in the UK all the time. It's an important part for students to see what sort of creative architects are doing, and you know, all practice should have that ability as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Architect Marcos. And here on my email, sent in the link of the email. It's admin@architectshub.com or WhatsApp, and it's 667275524. Also another email, events@architectshub.com. Thank you all. Thank you, Architect Marcos Rosello, for this talk. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I'm sure you enjoyed the talk and hope to see you soon in our next lecture. Thanks, Architect Abdullah, and you are working, Shams. Go ahead. We are so happy to have this great experience with the architect student from Qatar University. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.